evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Mahoning Drive-In Theater, the largest single-screen drive-in in the United States. We're certainly glad you could be with us this evening, and don't forget the concession stand is open with all kinds of great things to eat and drink.
.3 Mahoning Drive-In Radio, your old friend Virgil back once again for another exciting episode of the podcast. As you all know, the only podcast dedicated to the love and revival of our beloved drive-in culture. We've been revved up here at the Mahoning Drive-In Theater, and it's been a hell of a wave, and we are going to jump into things and give you guys a little bit of a review of all the cool stuff that's been happening at the Mahoning. Joined, as always, with the Mahoning General Manager and co-host extraordinaire, Mark. Say hello, my friend.
Hello.
So yeah, it has been an adventure of a month. It feels like it has been a year, but we're going to go over some shows and, we'll give you guys some inside baseball. Mark, you're a little sick right now, right?
A little bit. So if the occasional hack will be edited out deftly by me.
Yeah. So getting over some coughs. So if it's a little nasally or whatever, forgive us.
I recorded, we pre-record for our Patreon monthly virtual simplex shows. And it means the projector, not the disease. I was sicker when I recorded that, and I apologize, but I was very Brenda Vaccaro in my voice. I was very sultry. And
sometimes it works, you know?
and occasionally just lapsed into a coughing fit. But anyway, I should be fine.
And I do have Virgie here with me. So if occasionally he jumps in or says hello or is singing in the background, you'll know what's going on.
As long as it's not copywritten songs, we're okay.
I'm on daddy duty. It was great, though. We had the Alien screening to put a little timestamp on everything for Tunnel Vision Tuesday last night, and it was a banger. Our best turnout for a Tuesday yet this season. And Virgie was an amazing help. He was walking around with his own walkie-talkie and getting Sandy her money and making sure that the kids were all feeling good behind the stand. I was like, man, we are prepping him young. But it was a really great night. It was perfect as far as the sky. Not a single cloud in the sky. Stars were rocking, and the print looked beautiful. So the only thing that really sucked is Mark wasn't here.
I was sick.
Nah, but it'll be great to get the gang back together for this weekend, Van Party, which will be our first ever Dusk Till Dawn marathon.
And there's been high-level discussions of how exactly to execute 5 feature films in 8 hours without the sun eradicating, much like the vampires in the films. They're just eradicating the picture off the screen at dawn.
Kind of perfect. Yes, and I told the boys, they're really doing a great job, Mikey and Robert.
That's something people haven't heard this yet, I don't think, in the podcast, because it's been so long since we've released a new podcast. We have another assistant projectionist rocking that booth many nights per week.
Oh, yeah. Mike Drumbore, who has been a lover of the Mahoning since he was a child. He grew up right in town and came to the Mahoning as a kid, and super fan of what we did and connected with our fan base for sure. And yeah, as far as the support for Robert this year, because we have taken on so many events since 2020, leveled up, I should say, since 2020, that it's really more than a 2-man job now. So we have Mike running and splitting the work with Jeff and Robert, and it's been a dream. You know, the guys work incredibly well together, and it's exactly what we always hoped, is that, you know, this family can get along well enough and be able to care for each other enough and support each other enough that, you know, the venture each night is not an insane undertaking that's killing us.
No, and both Rob and Mike now have their own sort of mini setup at home. I mean, I don't mean like a backyard screen, but they have like a makeup table and a rewind bench and things like that. So they're inspecting prints, you know, during the week, so they don't have to do it, you know, in a rush before the show starts at the theater. Inspecting some of the new film acquisitions we've been getting and putting together the Patreon in-person shows well ahead of time. So it's not this race where, I mean, both Mike and Rob work full-time jobs, And on a Friday night, they're coming, like straight from their work to work, an entire night at the drive-in. So to be able to take a little of that weight off their shoulders is great. And they send us really cool internal scanned, like light bed photos of the film acquisitions we've been getting, and really cool little interesting quirks about the films that has personally been very entertaining to me.
Yeah, they don't just love it, they live it, and that's the thing with the Mahoning Drive-In Theater is once you're on the inside, it really becomes you to the point where it's you, and the guys have really taken on that role and leveled it up to a place that we've never been able to see because we've never been doing this type of action at the Mahoning.
So before we get into the season proper, we started talking, I think the last time we released a podcast with you, Jeff, and I, we do these Patreon exclusives occasionally once a month too. So I forget what goes where, but I know it's been mostly interview episodes everybody's been hearing for the last couple of months because we recorded so many of them in the off season. We're just getting this week, as I speak, we're just getting around to releasing one we recorded in February, 4 months ago. So playing some catch up.
They're so entertaining, by the way, Mark, because I have this weird thing in life, and now that the season has started, every night there is so much madness going on that my brain just kind of rattles away some memories and things that happen. So when I go back and listen to some of these interviews, I'm like, hey, we were really on point. That was a really great
totally forgot.
That's a nice trip for all of us.
So I think the last time we got together, we had talked about someone had contacted us. A woman had sent us an email saying her father had passed away and he was a 35 millimeter film collector. And she sent us a bunch of photos. And when we picked our jaws back up off the floor, we realized this was a collection somebody had spent a lifetime amassing dozens of feature film prints on 35, trailers, cartoons. He had a projector set up in his basement, like a full projection system set up in his basement, editing all that stuff. And she wanted to know if we were interested in it. And the answer was yes. So Jeff went over to take a look at it and he said, yes, we'll take everything but the projectors because we really have no use for that. And then it became, a waiting period of over the winter. And eventually the time came to get all this film into our possession. And we certainly couldn't take it to the theater. We had bought a collection several years ago, what I call the Grindhouse prints that Jeff had picked up, that were these old beat up prints of really just Grindhouse in style and Grindhouse in condition. And those were taking up a lot of space in the what little storage we have at the theater. So Jeff got a storage space for this film, and he had some people bring it over. And then he and I, about a week or so before we opened for the season, went over to sort of unbox all the film and put it on shelves and catalog what we had. And he thought we were getting 31 feature films. It turned out we were getting 42 feature films. And these are, most of it's pretty obscure, but it's film that really goes from the 1930s up into the 1990s. And so a couple of very recognizable titles, but a lot of really fun stuff. So Jeff and I spent the better part of a day doing that. And that was just, so whenever any of us have to go over to the film storage area, especially Mike Drumbor and I, we get giddy and we never want to leave because we're just surrounded by all these prints, and they have the original paper bands from the studios.
It's a honey hole now.
It's amazing. So we're still trying to sort it out. It's going to take a lot of time to inspect it all, but we've run a couple of those at our Patreon shows. And that leads into what our first actual event was this season. And that was on Thursday, April 28th. That was our first Patreon Simplex members only screening. It was sort of like a little gift to the Simplex, the highest tier Patreon members, where they would literally be the first audience to see a show in 2022 at the Mahoning. Our 70th anniversary, 73rd?
Yep, 73rd.
73 years now. So we never say what the titles are before the show. It's a surprise, and we don't say what they are afterwards. But it was one of the titles in that new film hall that really stood out to me as being really good and cool. And when we looked at the print initially, Jeff was like, oh, that's pretty pink. When it hit the screen, it was not as bad as we thought. It was faded. It happens with a lot of older film prints, especially if they're printed on Eastman stock. But it was a wildly entertaining movie, and everybody had a really good time. And it was great to basically just see everybody again. And it was almost like a dress rehearsal for what would be opening weekend the next day. So, the snack bar was open and the projection booth was going, and I did my DJ set, and it was, it was the first night we were all back. And I hadn't actually been down too many times over the off season. So it was nice to see everybody again and see the place, sort of, we always say the Patreon shows are like the old days. They're smaller crowds. They're very, very mellow. And we knew opening weekend would not be like that. So it was nice to sort of get our legs a little before we leapt into the next night.
It was such a strange feeling, because in years past, there's been obviously that crazy yearn, the preparation that we did this year, everything. But this year, it truly felt like, hey, 6 o'clock, opening night, snapped our fingers, and the lot filled up. The excitement shot through the roof. And it was almost like we were never gone, or like we had literally turned the lights off, turned them on, and people were there to be like, hey, we're ready. So it was so encouraging.
That's when I told everybody. It felt like I had been gone for a day, not 6 months.
Yeah, the Mahoning has that way. And I know from everybody telling us when they come in and embracing us that it's kind of indescribable what the community aspect of it all is. You really miss your friends, the people that you see all the time, obviously the entertainment aspect, but it really is a gathering ground for a like-minded group of people that in the off season just are kind of void of that and kind of searching for that. So it's really, really, again, inspiring that we can just kind of cut the rope and it's like back in biz.
And funny enough, at that Patreon show on Thursday night, one of our Simplex members who had mentioned this to me online before this, but he walks in with these 2 giant film reels. Now, the average film reel is what, about maybe twice the size of a LP, if somebody wants to just sort of imagine.
I mean, yeah, maybe, something like that.
Foot or so across. Somebody out there knows the exact dimensions. I don't, but they're sizable reels. This was like twice as big as that. These 2 huge plastic reels. He basically gave us a feature film that he had in his possession for like 20 years that had some trailers attached to it. Zachariah Smith is his name, and we thank him very much, because that will then be, I believe, in a couple of weeks, we're going to do another one of these in-person screenings, and that's going to be the feature we play. But this has been the year of a film collection that we had going from maybe 10 or so features to going to like 50 features. And it speaks to that like-mindedness, is that we're all there to celebrate watching some unknown movie on the screen, and somebody comes in and says, here's a feature, keep it. It was just very generous.
That's happening more and more. And the nice thing about opening weekend always is that it's a big family event. And we'd like to start our season with a couple family events to really let the locals know, hey, this is an option for you as well. And it works gangbusters for us. We've been doing the Wizard of Oz and Willy Wonka double feature for the last 7 seasons. So yeah, it's always something to look forward to. It's always a hit, always does well. And, like I said, it's the first hurrah as far as bringing the extended family back together.
And we had so many happy families. We had multiple little Dorothys dressed up. Zoe, as always, did her Dorothy. John and Cindy Demmer, John Demmer was dressed up like Willy Wonka, and Cindy Demmer was dressed up in an inflatable Oompa Loompa. It was Violet. It was Violet. So it was a big blue inflatable, like those sumo wrestler costumes. And they were greeting people at the gate, and people were honking as they rolled in. And then Zeneca did this amazing. It was like you were talking to the Wizard of Oz inside the snack bar. She does this really interesting projection mapping video. She'll know the terminology better than I am. Totally getting it wrong, but it looked like this Emerald City, almost like a frame around a circular video screen where there was this emerald-looking face of the Wizard of Oz, and she was carefully tucked behind. She was the man behind the curtain. She was the woman behind the curtain.
It was something else. She had pretty much like an interactive Wizard of Oz setup. So you could walk up to a microphone, ask the great and powerful Oz a question, and she would answer with all sorts of funny quips. She went all out, and Zeneca and Jason, her partner, they just put their whole heart into everything. And this, again, is coming off the Alien screening that just happened last night, and they put together the craziest looking xenomorph made out of like cardboard and paper mache, and it was blowing everybody's minds. So yeah, the production team is in full effect right out the gate.
So she had that in the snack bar, and I think she maybe had a book of like Wizard of Oz type jokes, because she was just cracking groaners left.
It was killing.
And little kids were like in awe because as far as they were concerned, they were really talking to the Wizard of Oz. Some amazing photos there. She also decorated the snack bar throughout with, you know, oversized candy. And then on our photo op stage outside, did like an oversized Wonka bar and a bunch of candy that people could stand behind and take photos with. And there was a line, I've got video, a line of people waiting to get their photo taken with that. It was beautiful.
It's become such a draw for what we do, you know, and I love that the production team has so embraced it, very much like the projection team. Like we just said, they've taken the idea of a production team and just taken it to a whole other level, and the idea of offering photo ops and taking it to a whole other level. And that I know that they love and appreciate it because it's constant love from people, you know, it's constantly being shared on socials and all that stuff. So it goes a really long way for their personal creativity as well. What did we have that Sunday, Mark?
Sunday was the debut of this season's Mahoning music series, which is a single feature. And that was, it's funny how you can call it The Who's Tommy or Ken Russell's Tommy, or I like to call it Ken Russell's The Who's Tommy. It was Tommy. 1975 on the big screen. A movie I remember seeing on cable and thinking, what is this? And that print was gorgeous.
Yeah, it was stunning. And, you know, a little inside baseball, we did some upgrading on the projectors actually right after that screening, and it still looked gorgeous. And it was one of those situations where it was memory lane. You know, we all have this experience with this movie. And for me, I saw it when I was getting into classic rock and my dad had passed on records to me, and the idea of, you know, Pink Floyd's The Wall and The Who's, Tommy's The Who, whatever the case. You know, it just kind of took you down that rabbit hole. But I'll never forget Anne Margaret rolling around in beans.
That was the impression that was made upon me as well. Yes.
It was just as glorious, 110 feet across. Yeah, Ken Russell goodness. And we got a great crowd for that, which was just our hope, is that those Sundays can do really well, just like the Tuesdays have picked up and done incredibly well. And the Tunnel Vision Tuesdays have been a hit.
I mean, and Harry, this season with Tunnel Vision Tuesday, you know, it has been seriously delving into the 20th Century Fox vault, because we, through our Disney connections, Disney now owns the library of 20th Century Fox. And when that happened, suddenly most theaters didn't qualify to be able to run old Fox titles anymore. So suddenly you didn't see Die Hard. You didn't see most of what we're going to talk about tonight. And out of the gate that Tuesday, which was May 3rd, Tunnel Vision Tuesday from Exhumed Films was Predator.
Click. Boy, oh boy. Yeah. Talk about coming out the gate swinging. Harry is making a statement with Tunnel Vision Tuesdays. It doesn't matter what day of the week it is. Exhumed brings the heat. So had an amazing screening with Predator. Great turnout. You know, it really rivaled our best. I think it might've been second best of the year. Everybody was ready to come back. And if it wasn't your bag that first Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Predator's your bag. And a lot of people came back from the horror community, and you know, again, the flood of love of people coming back. Tuesdays has become its own little community. You know, it's great because every week we see new people come in, but there is this central group of people where it's like, yeah, Tuesdays, this is my jam. This is where I go. It's the easiest $8 to spend in the world.
And on those Tuesdays, I don't get out to a lot of them. When I moved from New Hampshire to New York, and I went from being 6.5 hours away to 2.5 hours away, I was like, man, I'm going to be there every Tuesday. It's only 2.5 hours. And I did that once. I did it right after a busy weekend. And it's like, okay, I've worked late nights and long hours, and I'm driving home on a Sunday or even a Monday morning to then turn around and drive 2.5 hours south on a Tuesday to work for 2 hours, watch a 2-hour movie and drive back. And I was so wiped out for days. And it's like,
am I a crazy person?
Yes. I just can't do it. So if it's a movie I really want to see, I'll come out and I'll work up to showtime. But so I've not been out, and I don't think any yet this season, but there are some coming I'm definitely going to do.
Yeah, there's, you know, and like I said, it's always fantastic because Harry puts together an extended trailer reel. I've mentioned how some of my greatest memories are watching and experiencing some of those incredible deep cut trailers that Harry has.
And they all relate in some way. They're either trailers for movies that Exhumed will be showing at the drive-in, or they're trailers for films of the same star or the same genre or something like that. So it really sets the mood really nicely with that trailer reel before the movie. And it gives you a little value added for your single feature night.
Yeah, and it's my favorite to just kind of be out on the lot on Tuesdays because it's oohs and ahs. It's almost like people getting knocked over by an opening act or something. Right. They're just like, what the?
It tastes so good, it smells good, and what's gooder, it is so good. Popcorn, popcorn, everyone for popcorn.
Do it now. Pop out for a big box of fresh, delicious popcorn. It tastes good, and it's good for you.
Popcorn, popcorn, everyone for popcorn. Let's all pop out for popcorn.
What did we have weekend number 2? We started jumping right away from family into the horror, which is a nice little Mahoning hook.
We did, this was May 6th and 7th. It was Remake Double Take with The Fly.
So much fun with Remake Double Take. And it's the 3rd iteration, I believe, of Remake Double Take. We did The Blob, we did The Thing, and then we did The Fly this year. Yeah, so 3 years, and it's a great one. People always love to give their input for which Remake Double Take we should bring in. And we were really on the fence of doing the same double feature both nights, but it really worked out. The only downside of that weekend was that we had a print of the original Fly locked in, and at the last minute studio said, it's a little too beat up for us to feel comfortable sending it out. So last minute we had to do the switcheroo and go digital, but it was still an amazing showing whenever we get Vincent Price up on the big screen. And I don't know about you, Mark, but when you talk about memories and highlights and things that'll burn into my brain forever, we had an amazing photo op. James and John Demmer and the production team put together pretty much the Fly pod. And at one point, Robert, so dedicated, stripped down to his skivvies and got full Goldblum inside of that pod, and it's the greatest photo you'll ever see because at the right angle it looks like, man.
I said he should commit to that idea, and every time we do a photo op he should come out as naked Jeff Goldblum and just squat in the middle of it. So yeah, the backdrop, Andrew Kern, who's been doing if you've seen the amazing level up we've had with our Facebook banner art for this season. That's Andrew Kern Creative Design, who's been doing that. JT got him an image of the like a still from the 58 Fly of the laboratory. Andrew went in, erased a lot of things so that it just looked like the laboratory backdrop. And then JT and Steve Mills and others, John Demmer. I think John Demmer did the majority of the work because he's our craftsperson, our woodworker. And it was an exact replica of the Fly pod. It was really amazing. And it had Jonathan came, or Mr. Bones, we call him, and he added the smoke and lighting effects. And then JT had made a custom Fly head, like the original Fly. So and he had in the one claw in the lab coat. He was dressed exactly like the Fly from the original film. And there were these photos where he's stepping out of the teleportation pod with lighting effects and smoke, and it was amazing. He had a huge line. I want to say it was even in the rain. There was a line that went out into the darkness of people wanted to come up and get their photo taken with that.
Yeah, and right out the gate, again, it's such a draw for what we do. It's always an experience beyond the movies on the screen, and we had a lot of fans of the movies on the screen. So really great start there. I'm trying to think of it. We had really great weather out the gate too. We didn't really hit any issues until, of course, we get to Zombie Fest. So,
well, yeah.
What did we have? Oh, I remember because it was my birthday, May the 8th. We had a special Mother's Day screening of Serial Mom, and talk about bringing out your Mahoning crowd. It was again a gathering of the madness. Were you here for that screening, Mark?
I wasn't there for that because it was Mother's Day, so I was I was engaged in Mother's Day festivities on that day.
Yeah, totally. Well, yeah, it was one of those situations that we, again, we're still in celebration mode, still kind of in a rev up mode, and it brings out a whole new crowd. Whenever we play John Waters on the big screen, we certainly had some mothers on the lot, and it was a really nice night, a beautiful night as well. And yeah, that print looked gorgeous. There's always that question mark whenever we're about to hit screen, because we do inspection. all that stuff. And sometimes we'll get a print that it doesn't look great, and in this case, absolutely beautiful, people laughing along, cheering along, and it was a really great one.
That's a movie that my college roommate had the CD soundtrack of, and it had all these quotes, all these foul-mouthed Kathleen Turner quotes from the movie. So I've only seen the movie once, but I know so many lines from it from all the times we would just play that CD to hear her cussing at Dottie Hinkle.
Yeah, there was a lot of Pussy Willow jokes. There was a lot of chuckling amongst everybody in the pre-show and and afterwards.
So after that, we had Tunnel Vision Tuesday once again on May 10th, and that was John Woo's The Killer, one of the most influential and greatest action films of all time, certainly of the 90s. I was sad to not make it out. I'm a huge fan of the classic John Woo stuff, but again, for me, the Tuesday is tricky. But any opportunity to see these movies on a big screen, one should leap upon, because they do not get shown very often due to the rights issues and print availability and all that. I'm not even sure how easy it is to get The Killer on Blu-ray currently in this country.
Whenever we do the deep cut stuff, the deep cut action, Hong Kong Kung Fu stuff, it's once in a lifetime. It can really be once in a lifetime, especially on the Mahoning screen. And, not to get too deep, but I say it, like watching that film on a perfect night at the Mahoning, it's religious. And especially with that pre-show that Harry brings, again, it's just such an experience for $8 that's, kind of mind-bending. And I love the fact that Tuesdays has grown and grown and grown to the point where people are just so excited to make the trip out. And now that we're in the heart of the summer, it's nuts how many kids were here for Aliens last night, So I don't think anything is going to stop anybody from coming out and enjoying an event at the Mahoning.
Speaking of Asian murderers, after that, on May 13th through 14th, we had Sing Along Weekend, which was a double feature, theoretically now, the perfect double feature of Walt Disney's Mary Poppins and Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, a musical, family-friendly 1960s Dick Van Dyke double feature. Now, there's a little story behind that one. We asked Disney about this. It's long been known that Disney doesn't have a print of that film. The print's terrible. You can't show it. The print's in terrible shape, though I did hear that the New Beverly ran a perfect IB Tech print recently, but sometimes those come from collectors. So we have a friend who's a film collector, and he has a print of Mary Poppins. And we were like, excellent. And he said, it's in beautiful shape. Perfect. Great. We're all set. So we didn't bother to inquire any further. Chitty Chitty Bang Bang coming from Warner Brothers or Park Circus, different source. And then maybe a week before showtime, maybe less than that, our friend brings a reel of the print to just take a look at it on our projector to make sure it works okay, because I believe the sprocket holes were different.
It's what is called foxholes, which it's the first time I've experienced it here at the Mahoning Drive-In Theater. But it's pretty much a different kind of set of sprocket holes that allow for multiple soundtracks. So without those, you run the risk of tying up your film. If you don't have a sprocket to catch the holes, you're kind of screwed. So we did a little test with a short strip of film and said, hey, is this something that the E7 cannot run, at least not without a additional part put in. So we were sitting there with a gorgeous print of Mary Poppins ready to go. And we had to start scrambling and reached out to Disney, who, they only prefer us to show 35 millimeters. So the last thing we want to do is have to cut out a show. And yeah, sure enough, a print shows up from Disney. So what, the day of, 2 days of?
It was something like this. There's no print. Wait, we found a print. Wait, that print won't work. I guess we're doing digital. Hey, look, a print just showed up. Wait a minute. It's the sing-along version. Oh, no.
Yeah, it was nuts. And talk about a save the day adventure. Just like with our Dusk Till Dawn planning, it's sometimes these things that happen ancillary to the show and even the movie screening is part of the fun and adventure of what we do. And certainly getting Mary Poppins 0 Hour with the sing-along titles at the bottom while we are promoting Sing Along Weekend, it was perfect. I mean, of course, we have loved to play an original print of Mary Poppins, absolutely. But second best, being able to show it with the sing-along titles, And it worked like a charm. Everybody loved it. It looked gorgeous.
The sing-along titles it wasn't a follow the bouncing ball. It was simply like it was just subtitled during the songs, very simple subtitles. So it wasn't that obtrusive. And yeah, it looked beautiful on that screen. Downside was we forgot when we put this event together that this was the era where light Disney family type musicals were seen as events and were 2.5 hours long. So
our second nights out at the movies.
Our second feature didn't really start until like 11:30 or so. So any parents with kids who wanted to introduce them to the magic of Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, they weren't starting until roughly midnight, and that was wrapping up somewhere around 2-3 in the morning. So people did stay to the end, but it was one of those things where it was like, wow, they sure made them long back then, didn't they?
They're like, way to go, Mahoning. Way to choose them. But no, that's the nature of early season, late season is, we just get these shifts in time and we have to play with the run times and all that stuff. If anything, this year we are getting experimental with run times. So I'm really interested to see how the James Bond night plays out, even the Bronson night. That's going to be a long triple feature. And obviously Schlockorama. We always try to tap 4 movies for that. So it's always a nice run.
Those tend to be somewhere in like the 60 to 70 minute range usually. But there was a Schlockorama where they were all 90 minutes and it was like, oh, it's a long night.
Hello, son.
Now back to the production team. Zeneca once again came in and decorated for Mary Poppins. And she created outside, she took a chimney that was originally put together, a fake chimney top that was created by, I believe, Steve Mills for Silent Night, Deadly Night, that a murderous Santa was originally coming out of, and redid it slightly to be a chimney for, to reference Bert the Chimney Sweep from Mary Poppins. And she had like a moonlit sky background put out in our photo op stage outside, and people could take their photo with like a chimney sweep brush in front of it. And it was gorgeous. And actually a little kid arrived dressed as a chimney sweep, which was...
It was the greatest. The hat, the soot on the face, it was fantastic. And this isn't to toot our own horn, but we saw a flood of positive reviews on Google and on Facebook after those first 2 weekends of families saying like, thank you so much, giving this experience to my kids and all that stuff. So that really makes what we do here well worth it.
On the inside of the snack bar, Zeneca was dressed as Mary Poppins and had recreated the tea with penguins, that animated live action sequence. So she had like some outdoor white, like cast iron, wrought iron, whatever furniture, sitting down with cardboard cutout replicas of the penguins and a backdrop that was from the movie. And the number of amazingly gorgeous, cute photos that came out of that. People were to meet Mary Poppins.
She had the penguin set up so you could get a kiss from the penguin. Mm-hmm. And again, the little touches that the team does is amazing. And Zeneca looks so amazing as Mary Poppins. Just seeing kids gush over meeting Mary Poppins, it's amazing.
So we followed that up with more family fare, and that was on Sunday, the 15th of May, A Hint of Clint, the outlaw Josie Wales, featuring one of my favorite lines from a movie ever. Dying ain't much of a living, boy. I was not there for that, unfortunately, but I love seeing the Clint Westerns on our screen.
I'm part of Clint Eastwood fan page on Facebook, and I got the greatest shot because it was perfect night again, where the skyline was just perfect during that first reel. And I snapped a picture of Clint in all of his glory, and it's just one of the best shots I ever got on the lot. Print looked amazing. Seeing the scenic westerns up on that massive CinemaScope screen, it speaks volumes on what is so special about this screen and about CinemaScope in general. But yeah, amazing turnout. We had cosplayers, even though we didn't call for it. We had a Clint Eastwood show up. It was a hot night, and he was rocking the poncho. And I was like, we can get a couple shots with the reels, but feel free to shed that poncho. Don't want to be, happy going down on the lot. It was just fantastic. I'm trying to think. John Demmer showed up, and he had like a tire horse. He always decorates his car. He had like a tire horse to the car type thing, and it was just amazing.
That was Warner Brothers. We get Warner Brothers prints from Warner Brothers still, or do those now come from Park Circus?
Now they come from Park Circus. The prints are housed with Park Circus. But at that point, it was coming from Warner Brothers Studio.
Tuesday after that, May 17th, was Alien on the big screen. And this night was a blockbuster. This night did insanely well for us on a Tuesday.
It was crazy. It crushed Sunday. It was one of those situations where I say it. There's certain titles that you put up on the screen and people are coming. It doesn't matter if it's on a Monday, if it's on Labor Day, it doesn't matter. Like, people are coming to see Alien. And when Harry announced he was not just doing Alien, but Aliens the following month, it immediately shot up on the pre-sales and got into many people's calendars. So perfect night again, perfect print. And it was just fantastic all around. The fandom. Zeneca and Jason brought along the alien eggs, and they were smoking, had the light coming out from them, very realistic, nice backdrop. So it was just a scene. Again, on a Tuesday when we can bring the Mahoning heat, it's really fantastic.
And that's new for us too, is to have any kind of a photo op or props and things on a Tuesday. Usually Tuesdays are much more, I don't want to say no frills. They're just really about what's on the screen more than anything else. But with the additional people we have in the production team now and what Zeneca and Jason can do, it is cool to see the Mahoning treatment given to a Tuesday night show.
Yeah, nothing will stop the insane fandom for sure. People show up in cosplay every day of the week now. They embrace it every single time that we're open, which is fantastic.
Savory barbecue beef. Go ahead, fix a sandwich for yourself. Just look at that pure prime beef simmering in that special tangy barbecue sauce. Make a big one, like you do for the customers. Customers? Uh-oh. Well, somebody got it. Have to fix yourself another.
Savory barbecued beef. There's still plenty for you at the Refreshment Center.
You want to talk about cosplay and people embracing something? That weekend this was May 20 to 21. It's a Mad Max 2. Now, this was a follow-up to what we had done in 2020. Faye Merman and Jim Tank Dorsey put together this amazing Mad Max show. They're very deep into the Mad Max fan community, and they go to this Wasteland event in Australia where people from all over the world gather and like live Mad Max in the desert and stuff like that. I presume it was Australia. When we did it in 2020, she gathered fellow fans and cosplayers and people with vehicles and had on-screen intros by various Mad Max actors, and then we ran all 4 Mad Max movies. And it was such a huge hit. And in the thick of the pandemic, when a lot of people couldn't travel internationally or nationally, didn't want to, we knew we would bring that back. So that's what we did a couple weekends ago. And this time we had Vernon Wells, he who played Wes, the Mohawked biker in The Road Warrior. We had him with us Friday and Saturday, and he was a blast and a half. I think of him too as the bad guy in Commando.
Yes, which we were really on the fence of playing that on the following Sunday after, but it's coming later in the year. Stay tuned. But yeah, guys, it's when we have these experiences with the stars of the movie on the lot, it takes what we do to a whole other level. He was the perfect guest, so right at home, loved the 35 millimeter aspect, loved the fandom, loved what the Mahoning does. And he gave us some of the greatest Q&A action up on the screen. Not to spoil anything, because we do post this up to our Patreon as an exclusive, but at one point, Vernon Wells asked, "What's a queef?" on the microphone, and I literally died.
And I heard your laughter from across the lot.
It was magic. I was like, okay, best event we've ever done. Close it up.
So Vernon was there doing a photo. We had a VIP thing. So if you paid for the extra VIP, you got in early and you got a photo up with Vernon, more or less in costume as he was on a replica of the motorcycle from the Road Warrior. And then he was there, all day signing and hanging out with people and doing those intros. I think there were maybe about a half hour each. He did one per night with Jeff Fremess, and we project those on the big screen. And then, as Virgil said, we record those and post them on the Patreon. And he was just a super nice guy, super funny joking around. You know, when we have somebody's birthday on the staff, we'll do a cake and a little sing song for them, usually just after intermission. And he was in the stand when that happened. So I have video of Vernon Wells singing "Happy Birthday" to Deep Hell, and that was pretty wonderful. And took a pretty great group photo. He was a great guy. He was the guy you want him to be, basically.
Yeah, some guests are just perfection. I go back to the Bruce Campbell thing, where the man literally took like 700-800 professional photo ops, and every single one he struck a different pose. It was like seeing somebody, you know, just on fire. And Vernon was kind of the same way. He gave everybody this playful experience and took his time. And that's exactly what you want from a guest. You know, we love spending the money to bring guests out and make the experience that much more magical for people. And we've gotten in the habit now of trying not to overprice the tickets either. That event was a $10 ticket, you know? So the idea of coming in and being able to hang with Vernon and the Wasteland crew for 10 bills, it's like, come on, take my money.
And for that, you know, Tank has apparently one of the largest Mad Max memorabilia collections, certainly in the country, maybe in the world. And he brought, I think, all of it out, like in a box truck. So you had all of these mannequins set up on our photo op stage with all the different costumes from the different movies you had. And I think he changed them. I think one night they were one set and the next night they were another set. And then on this huge row of tables, he had all these like bits of things that came from the original sets and prop replicas and actual props from the movies with, you know, photos from the movie so you could see where they were used. It was really, really cool. It was like a convention, a museum, and a film festival all together. And the first night we ran Mad Max and the Road Warrior on film. And then the second night we ran Thunderdome, Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, and Mad Max Fury Road on film. And people were they were there for all of it.
So Faye and Tank, it's ridiculous, bro. Like what they bring to an event is nuts. It, like you said, it had all the memorabilia, screen used and otherwise, largest in the United States, on display for people to just peruse. We kept saying the outdoor Mad Max museum, and it truly was.
Yeah, and what we were saying too during that weekend is they are so organized in terms of getting in the guests and the handlers and the organization of their aspect of the show. It's like we just focused on like running the snack bar in the gate. It was like in the projection booth. Like it was usually we're dealing with a lot of the external stuff that is part of a show, but that was just very smooth show that was for how, you know, big and popular it was.
Yeah, it's worth every single penny. I mean, it's that partnership. It was born truly because Faye was friends with James and was a fan of what we were doing. And I think the first time that I actually met her, she was here with a film crew and she was working for one of the local television stations. And before I know it, she's April O'Neil for us for our Ninja Turtles event. And now we do annual events with her once a year. She's responsible for the Mad Max and David Lynch events. And she already said it. She's plotting and scheming for David Lynch's return in 2023. So stay tuned.
We moved on from the madness of Max to some Kung Fu Mania the next day. It was May 22nd to Sunday. It was the kickoff of our new Sunday Essentials series. And that was Bruce Lee in Enter the Dragon splashed across the mighty Mahoning screen. And we had an intro with the authors of These Fists Break Bricks, an excellent book that if I haven't talked enough on this podcast about, I will over time. It's this great book that just looks at how Kung Fu movies came to the US and exploded and how that just, you know, took off around the world from there. And that was Grady Hendrix and Chris Pajali came out and they were selling and signing books. And then they did an on-screen, like a 10-minute or so on-screen intro that was very interesting and hilarious, where they just talked about how Bruce Lee, you know, came to be and how this movie came out and all the Bruce Lee knockoffs and the Bruceploitation movies and all of that stuff. And illustrated with all these images of posters and ad mats and screenings and marquees and things like that. It was super entertaining. And then we all watched Enter the Dragon on the big screen, which is a movie I've been waiting for us to show for years. Big Bruce Lee fan, big martial arts movie fan. And martial arts, a genre that never tends to do terribly well for us for whatever reason, but I'm always behind it when we get another shot.
Yeah, and it's one that we'll always dig back to because we're all such fans, you know. And talk about the photo op night. It's hugely frowned upon in any movie theater for you to take your phone out and snap a picture. But I love going through Instagram and catching people who catch the title cards or catch those pivotal scenes. Holy crap, seeing Bruce up on that big screen larger than life, it was magic. And again, perfect weather.
And that movie works. It works so well. It's so tight. It's like a comic book. It's really, obviously it's a tragedy. Bruce Lee didn't live longer, but you watch that and you want more movies where he and John Saxon team up to go infiltrate someplace and kick ass.
That was a great one too. Is Andy over the walkie? He's like, is that freaking John Saxon? Is there anything John Saxon's not in?
Oh, I know. That man worked. And our friend Dave Wright came in early and helped enhance the show by bringing in vintage 70s Kung Fu movie posters to fill the poster cases in the snack bar. And he donated a vintage, The Dragon Lives Again, I believe, one of the Bruceploitation movies, a vintage poster for that for our raffle. We initially weren't even planning to have a raffle. And then Tom Bafulco, who did the poster art for that event, said he would donate a Bruce Lee portrait, which was amazing. And I keep telling him it has to be a t-shirt. And then John Dahl came in at one of the Simplex shows, and he gave me this lenticular Bruce Lee portrait where, you know, you move, it looks like it's 3D. And then Dave brought in that poster in a Jimmy Wang Yu DVD, and suddenly we had this really cool raffle for that night. So that was one of my favorite nights of the season. Certainly his favorite single feature night of the season so far was Enter the Dragon.
That's what we said. You know, Sunday, as much as the fans love it, it's also a personal love of these genres. And we have amazing nights out on the lot. And as long as we're watching our overhead and all that stuff, it's an amazing experience every time.
And we've talked about how Harry is expanding a lot of his signature events, a lot of the signature Exhumed events into more than just, you know, Friday, Saturday. So occasionally there'll be a Thursday or a Sunday added. And now he's stretching it out even into our Television Tuesdays. So after Enter the Dragon, the next show we did on the 24th of May was Television Tuesday Exhumed Presents Society, Brian Usna's Society, which is a strange and gooey movie.
Man, oh man. Usna, after meeting him, we had him for Zombie Fest that coming weekend. He is a dream, and it was an amazing thing to see because he's not a convention guy, and his brain was kind of split in half at the maddening line that he had all weekend and the love that he was getting.
For Society, Zeneca again utilized it much very similar to the set. I'm using my hands because they can see this on a podcast. She had the similar, and I did it again, the similar setup to what she did for The Wizard of Oz, where it was this strange flesh-like border around this circular video screen. And it was strange and gooey and completely on point for how weird a movie Society is.
It's a fan favorite, and it's one that you see memes go around about all the time. And we're part of the Lehigh Valley Horror community, which is a great social group on Facebook for our local fans. And you see it pop up all the time. It's one of those movies that screams drive-in, that just screams. And it played like gangbusters. The only downside was that we couldn't get Brian to come in a little bit early, because I'll tell you what, after the experience he had for Zombie Fest, he probably would have came and just stayed all week.
And if anybody doesn't know, Society is 1989, I want to say, 89 or 90. And it's a movie that's set in, you know, posh, let's say Beverly Hills, where this young affluent boy realizes that the members of the upper crust of society are really strange, and they have some pretty serious dues to pay to become the level of social status they have. And it just gets very strange and rubbery and shiny and gooey.
Eat the rich. And it's a good time to mention the DJ sets this year have been insane. And The Touched, our good friend Alex, who is a volunteer here at the Mahoning, is just crushing it with his DJ sets. He's been jumping in. Brendan from Jersey, a.k.a.
Dr. Jones.
Dr. Jones. Perfect moniker. Yeah, it's a really great time between Carl and myself, yourself. It's always fun.
And if anybody doesn't know what we're talking about, we have a vintage, Jeff salvaged this from an old radio station, a vintage 50s, 60s era DJ booth from a radio station with 2 turntables, CD you name it. You can play anything, just about anything other than 8-track on it. And we do live DJ sets from 6 o'clock when the gate opens until showtime each night. And then sometimes during intermission a little bit too. And it's just one of the staff or friends of staff or customers signs up and sits down and plays really whatever they want and gives announcements. It's a useful tool really in letting people know when the movie's going to start, what the snack bar specials are, what the raffles are, if there's any new merch. It's a good information conduit as well as entertainment. And everybody brings their own spin to it. And I love it. Like, everybody's different. I love to hear everybody's mic technique, what style of music they play. I always tell anybody who DJs, you're doing it right if somebody works their way into the projection booth to thank you for playing something that you just played, because our musical tastes are also eclectic. Invariably, somebody's going to play something that somebody on the lot thought they were the only person who liked. And it's a lot of fun. I love doing it whenever I can.
Yeah, it's a fantastic time and a great extension of what the documentary presents, which is kind of the inside baseball or our inside personalities. So, and it birthed this, what you're listening to.
Yeah.
Podcast.
That's why we call this Mahoning Drive-In Radio, because that's what we say on the air there. And we actually have the logo for this podcast is now adorns the front of that DJ booth, which is really cool.
It is midnight on a tropical island. A beautiful young girl's long hair streams against the coral reef. Her beautiful body is caressed by the tide. Suddenly, a decayed hand rises up and blood-drenched jaws move to bite her. The living dead walk again. Zombies. They are decaying. They are missing from their graves. They live and hunger for your flesh. There is no place you can hide. Zombie, you are what they eat. No one under 17 will be admitted. Zombie.
So Society led into, it was a little teaser of Zombie Fest. Was it 8, I believe?
8. How insane is that? 8 years of Zombie Fest.
It's arguably one of our biggest shows. Not arguably, it's one of our biggest shows that Exhumed puts on for us. And that was the 26th through the 29th of May. So that was Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So on Thursday, we started off with a little film, kind of obscure, but we rolled the dice with it anyway, Night of the Living Dead from 1968. And Exhumed brought out in person John A. Russo, who was the co-writer of Night of the Living Dead and has written a lot of things since then, a few movies and a lot of paperbacks. And he was in the movie as well. So he had a huge line, super nice guy. We wound up playing as a co-feature My Uncle John is a Zombie that John, I believe, wrote and directed a couple of years ago. And that was digital because it doesn't exist on film. But it was an original print of Night of the Living Dead, which looked great. Always great to see that movie at a drive-in in Pennsylvania. And really good, strong turnout for that first night.
Yeah, and John is a dream. Like, talk about a guest giving everything. He was so in love with what we did and the fact that we're still running 35 millimeter. And again, with the fandom and embrace that he got, John's a guy who I see out all the time. And Thursdays are tough for us as far as pulling people in, especially when you have an amazing 3-day event coming up. But like you said, incredible turnout. Nothing stopped anybody from coming out. Beautiful night. Print looked gorgeous. Classic on the big Mahoning screen. Can never go wrong.
And he wasn't the only guest we had that weekend. This is one of those things. Before we started recording this, we're like, God, I hope I can remember everything. And that jogged my memory. We had a French documentary crew with us for that Thursday and Friday. These people had Matthew, the director of this documentary, I don't know what it's going to be called, but it's being done for French HBO Max. So it's being done for a pretty large entity. And the idea was that they would visit 6 drive-ins in America. Each one they would drive into with a vintage classic car. And funny enough, we were able to help them acquire this classic car by contacting a previous podcast guest, Tom Quigley, who had done the documentary on the Back to the Future DeLorean that we talked to a while ago. I contacted him and I said, where did somebody find a vintage car? And apparently there's this thing that's called, I don't know what it's called, but it's sort of like an Airbnb for classic cars. Like if you want to rent a classic car for some reason, people who have them and are willing to rent them have this website. So they rolled in On Friday night, they rolled in with this vintage 80s, like family truckster kind of thing. But on Thursday, they were there taking a lot of B-roll and doing a lot of interviews. And it was just wild that, we're showing Night of the Living Dead, and we have John Russo here. And there's a documentary team from the other side of the country, the other side of the world, who has come to point cameras at all of it.
Yeah, it's so strange, these things that happen on the lot. I got a call in the off season from a number that said literally Paris, France. I'm like, this has to not be real. And turned out to be the film crew and their producers, and were asking if it would be okay if they came out for one of our events. And the stars aligned with them being there for Zombie Fest. In a strange way, that car that Mark's talking about, it's a wood-paneled station wagon that has the rear-facing seat, and you open up the back door. It's kind of like a big like refrigerator door style. It opens up from the side. But that was the literal car that I went to the drive-in with my cousin for years. And we sat in that rear-facing seat. When I think about my memories at the drive-in, that rear-facing seat is such a key element. And in a weird way, it's kind of my dream car. One of the ugliest, weirdest looking cars ever, but it is like, wow, to have that rear-facing seat at the drive-in, done.
Jumping back, I think we talked about this when we did the podcast, but with Tom Quigley. But my dream car was always the Lamborghini Countach from Cannonball Run, until I watched that documentary about the car. It's like it's impossible to get into. It's impossible to see out of the back window. You can't back it up. Like you can't hear. It's incredibly loud. Like it's like everything is wrong with that car except it looks so cool, and it was in that movie. that helped cure me of still having that glimmer of a dream that maybe one day it'll fall into my hands. It's like, no, it's okay. He could have it. Just give me a ride in it once. So yeah. Your car is much more practical.
In a weird crossover way, what they ended up shooting was like the intro to The Shining, where it's the overhead following the car along the mountainous roads. And I literally had that scene like plotted out, and the fact that they shot it and it's going to come to real life. My favorite part of meeting those guys, Matthew says to me, I go, what is this documentary for? He goes, Warner Brothers. I'm like, oh, we know freaking Warner Brothers. I'm thinking like it's some sort of a film schooly type of thing. It's like as legit as can be. And the director of High Tension is narrating it, and It had a weird crossover. And yeah, it was really fantastic. And talk about bringing another culture into the drive-in and the Mahoning. Those guys fell in love. They would have literally lived here all summer if they could have. We made them right at home, and they had an absolute blast.
And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into what happened on Friday, the 27th of May. We had the Exhumed program, a triple feature of Chud, Life Force, and The People Who Own the Dark. Now, I had done a podcast a couple episodes back with Austin Trunick, the author of the Canon Film Guide, about Life Force. So if you're interested in Life Force and you haven't heard that, go back and listen. It's a really fun listen. Life Force is just this wacky movie, and the print that we had from again, I think it was Park Circus, was the extended international cut, a longer cut of the film. Chud is the classic about cannibalistic humanoid underground dwellers in New York City with Daniel Stern and John Hurd. Somebody pointed that out to me. It never occurred to me. Co-stars of Home Alone first met during Chud. And then the last film was Leon Klimovsky's People Who Own the Dark, which is a great Spanish horror film. So let's talk about the photo op for that.
So James is a madman. When he originally pitches ideas, very much it's hard to visualize sometimes. And there is a method to his madness that really only he can explain and put together. So his whole pitch was, I want to do a Chud photo op, and I want to have a Chud coming up out of the ground as well as Chuds above ground. So we're thinking, okay, how are you going to pull this off? So James and Steve, the Mills brothers, put together amazing Chud outfits that they could wear that were perfect screen accurate. And they put together a Chud that they had coming up out of a sewer hole, out of the staged area that we had. And then you throw the lighting effects and smoke from Mr. Bones. It was like Hollywood ready, and it blew people's minds. And people always wonder what the power of those photo ops is. The ticket bump from Friday to Saturday was unbelievable. And a lot of that credit goes to James and the production crew, because every single person that comes is like, where are those chuds? I need this cover photo.
Again, and what he does now too is a lot of those that have lighting and smoke effects, they're not really effective until after it gets dark. And so he'll say now, photo op starts at 7 or starts at 8 or whatever time it's dark enough. So there's literally a line of people that goes from the lit photo op area off into the darkness somewhere. You couldn't see the end of the line of people waiting to get their photo taken with the chuds. And he also does something we don't often mention, and I forget, but he often will have a speaker there playing a score from the movie. So he's recreating a scene from the movie or an iconic image from the movie. And while you're there, you're hearing the music from the movie in that scene, which is it's so immersive and wonderful. And I put together a little video that's on Patreon. I call them glimpses of Zombie Fest. And, we don't have a lot of extra space at the drive-in for the guys to get ready and people to change in and out of costumes. So they use this tiny little space that's off the projection booth. And there's this wonderful shot of, Jeff in his chair, somebody DJing, Rob and or Mike doing their thing. And then these two chuds just wander out and they can't see. They can never see with these masks and things on. So Zoe's usually the one who's leading them by the hand and saying, okay, to your left, to your right, don't trip. And just watching the chuds walk out through the snack bar, especially if people had no idea they were going to be there, is pretty wonderful.
Yeah, and bringing Steve onto the payroll this year was such a great move. At one point, my favorite moment probably of Saturday night, they were getting a video for the social medias, and they were doing this chud movement that you could tell like they both planned and practiced this in a mirror, because you couldn't tell which Mills was which Mills. It was just perfect. Like 2 Mills are better than 1.
So we didn't have a guest that night. Brian Usna came back the next night on the 28th of May because it was Usna night. We had Reanimator, Bride of Reanimator, and the very rare, I don't know where Exhumed found this print. I think it was actually Usna's actual personal print, Necronomicon, Book of the Dead, early 90s anthology film based on Lovecraft type stories. And Brian Usna was selling original Reanimator one sheets signed for a very, very affordable price. And he was moving those things like nobody's business. He had, as you said, this incredibly long line, super nice guy, willing to pose with photos for everybody and pose funny poses, often choking people or having people choke him. Was I guess the movie.
He was loving it.
He did an intro to the first film on screen under the big screen. So we had Andy out there with the video camera and it was splashed up onto our screen live and coming through the radio. And then for the subsequent movies, he came into the projection booth and got on the mic and introduced each film. And just a super nice guy and a really just rocking night. Our friend Lindsay was back as Dr. Herbert West, looking perfect. And it was just a really, it's everything you want Zombie Fest to be.
Yeah, we should mention we certainly were at sellout numbers for Saturday. So, the train keeps rocking as far as our big annual events and the popularity of them each year. We always say in a weird way, Zombie Fest is and always was the kickoff to the season for us. Falls right on the holiday. Kids are getting out of school and the attention is back on drive-ins. And it delivered in a big bad way this year. Yeah, but I got to say, Usna was the perfect storm. He was like a first-time guest. He hadn't done conventions, so people were like chomping at the bit to get autographs. And it seemed like he saved up almost every piece of memorabilia over 30, 40 years and put it out on his table with a price tag. And people went nuts. Like, Reanimator wallets, Reanimator biker shorts, like stuff where you're like, what's going on? Where did this come from? But people were like, I'm getting that. And as a weird twist of fate, he was selling his 35 millimeter personal trailer of Reanimator, which had a nice price tag on it. And a fan bought it for Robert. So now it's part of the Mahoning trailer library.
Yeah, that was Robert Hood, who is A1 good guy. He comes out from Pittsburgh, drives hours and hours fairly often, and he's a Patreon member. He actually signed up for Patreon Simplex level while I was driving down for that first show of the season. And I saw a notification pop up and I did a quick speech to text thing to him saying, I don't know if you're free tonight, but if you are, you now qualify to come to this thing. And he did. I think he was coming out for that weekend anyway. And he's volunteered for us. He's helped with crowd control. Super nice guy. And yeah, out of pocket, he bought Rob that Reanimator trailer. So that was extremely kind. And so the next night, the 29th, Mr. Usna stayed with us because he had a hand in one of the films that night. It was House, Return of the Living Dead 3, and the Vincent Price Last Man on Earth. And Brian Usna had directed Return of the Living Dead 3. May have written it too, but I know he directed it. And he again did an intro from under the screen for Return of the Living Dead 3, and we projected it up on the big screen. And it was a great night. And even for a Sunday, it was still a very fun, robust, healthy night. And I must jump back on Friday night with the French documentarians. They wanted a scene in their documentary of this station wagon driving into the drive-in at night and being besieged by zombies. Now, I might have said when they first talked to us by email that, oh yeah, there'll be tons of people in zombie makeup. They just come out like that. Well, on that night, we didn't really have anybody in zombie makeup except the Chuds. So Matthew was asking me if I would get made up as a zombie or if I could find anybody. And I basically asked the snack bar crew, because it was during the movie, anybody want to get made up as a zombie? So like all the kids came out, and Robert Hood and a couple of staffers, and Jonathan poured blood all over people in various degrees and created wounds and things. And then we repeatedly were recorded, being zombies approaching and climbing all over this car. Now, I didn't realize that the people driving this vintage car were the owners of the car. And we were, slathering, spraying, smearing fake blood all over the car, crawling on the hood, banging on the windows. And by the time we were done, the male owner of the car got out and he's like, oh, I got a car show on Sunday. I'm gonna have to wash all this blood off. The engine's been running. It's getting hot. It's baking into the paint. And I'm like, I'll be seeing you later. Speak to the French documentarians. But as I said to the kids, I'm like, this is Friday night at work. How was your Friday night at work? I got as a zombie to appear in a French HBO Max documentary.
Yeah, we find ourselves in these weird situations quite often, and the theatrics that we like to bring and the fact that people like to involve us in this stuff is really, really magical. And the crew certainly loves it.
So Exhumed Films extended Zombie Fest sort of by one more day. A couple of days later, on the 31st of May, Television Tuesday was City of the Walking Dead. Now, this is the Italian zombie movie that opens with a plane load of zombies busting out of like a cargo plane and firing machine guns and driving Jeeps. It's crazy. It's like an insane zombie movie. And you had said in a Patreon exclusive podcast we did that we had like six families come out or something like that.
It was crazy. Like, again, the Memorial Day kickoff, Zombie Fest, all that stuff, the promotion, the social media hits over the first month. It just was a perfect storm. Every single show since has been really, really stellar, with drive-ups, with families, with unexpected families. That's not a movie where I'd expect to see a slew of families, but I love the fact that we get those cool parents that are like, I'm going to pass this tradition on to my kids, and the experience of seeing a horror movie at a drive-in. And it's great because there's a ton of meat on that bone if you're a Mahoning fan.
Hi, I'm Chili Dilly, the personality pickle. Packed in a jar for the freshest flavor. Served cold in a sack for you to savor. So dainty to eat, no muss, no fuss. An ideal snack for all of us. Crisp, tender, and tasty with a bit of spice. Buy one now. Taste how nice. Snack bar clerks will knock themselves silly, speeding your order for a real chili dilly.
So the next weekend after that, mere days later, June 3rd and 4th, is the return of one of our favorite events. And an event that when you tell people about it, they're like, I don't know. And I'm always like, you need to come and see this. Real Rumble 3.
Holy crap. What LVAC does is nuts.
LVAC, Lehigh Valley Apparel Company, who does most of our t-shirts, all of our t-shirts and some merch. They also are the Lehigh Valley Athletic, what's the C stand for?
Company. I believe.
Athletic Company. They also promote and do regional wrestling shows, like pro wrestling shows. And the first time they brought this to us, I was never that much of a wrestling fan. And when basically the deal is they set up a real pro wrestling ring under our screen during the day, and they do like 2 hours of matches. And then at night we show movies that are starring wrestlers or about wrestling or something like that. And when the matches start, the snack bar dies because everybody wants to see the show. So all of us snack bar staff kind of stepped out of the snack bar enough to keep an eye on the stand, but also see what was going on. And we just thought it was amazing and hilarious. And we all just fell in love with this event after that. And this year they brought, we had for films, we had The Wrestler and a mystery title on Friday, and then The Running Man with Jesse Ventura and The Scorpion King with The Rock on Saturday. And I was able to, now that we have enough staff and I'm a general mangler, I was able to sort of go up front and watch a little of the wrestling on Friday. And it was amazing. And the crowd was so into it.
It's not.
And I went back in and I relieved Kaylin, who's Sandy's merch assistant. She had never seen it before and there was nothing going on. So I said, go up there and watch until you've had enough and then come back. I'll stay here. I'll work the stand if need be, but just, you need to go see this. And she came back with a huge smile on her face. And it was so much fun.
It's the talk about spectacle, you know, and we talked about this on a previous podcast, whether it was for Patreon or not. What the Mahoning has done kind of unintentionally by bringing all these outside entities and extra things to the drive-in is taking it back to the Grindhouse era when they would do anything and promote anything to get your butt on the lot. So it's like, hey, come see live wrestling is just as nuts as come see a woman get buried alive tonight at the drive-in. So it's this really cool aspect to what we offer, and that is one that just takes it to another level because the production value is there, the talent is there, the athleticism is there, the built-in fandom of wrestling is there. And it should be mentioned, LVAC got Orange Cassidy last year, who's a huge AEW wrestler right now. So big crossover with them and AEW, and it's just so much fun. And Mark, I'm sure you're going to talk about it. Probably the greatest memory of the year so far is being able to get involved in a wrestling match.
So I stayed over on Friday night, and my plan was to work until the movie started on Saturday and then come back north. And so I had I got no place else to go. So I sat at the DJ booth and I set my computer up and I get some work done. And I'm in there relatively early. And Virgil messages me and says, the LVAC wants to know if we will be involved in a melee match or something like that. We, meaning Virgil and myself. And I said, yes, I just don't hurt me. And it came back that they would not hurt me. And so I'm like, okay, great. And he sends me this text that worked out. Here's what the plan's going to be. And here's the idea. And then later the heel wrestler came in and explained with Chris from LVAC, you know, kind of what we were going to do and where I should be when. And Virgil and I were involved in semi-professional wrestling. And it
was a melee. It was a melee. The guys pretty much, you know, rumbled outside of the ring. At one point fell into a baby pool and tripped over a setup tent, which Alf was in. Yes, Alf from Melmac.
So I show up on Friday and I see a full-size adult Alf costume in a box. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be good.
This event is going to be something.
So yeah, Chris apparently does this. Chris from LVAC dresses up as Alf and occasionally just runs across the background and nobody makes any reference to it whatsoever.
Alf did make an appearance in ring last year, which was quite a sight. But yeah, at one point they smashed into my trailer and came into the trailer and it was like a rumble inside. And then I throw them out onto the porch or out onto the grass and they make their way into the ring. And the big cap on the match is that Mark pitches popcorn into the face of our heel, who I think was using the solar panel farm as an angle. It was really great. He says, if I win.
He was talking trash. He was telling me I'm going to go get a job at Becky's and all this other stuff. And you know, you can only push a man so far. And, you know, I've seen Walking Tall. I know how you do it. We actually talked ahead of time about that, and it was either a film reel, a baking sheet, or popcorn would be used as the weapon. And I'm like, well, the other two don't really make any sense. And to me, it's the silliest thing to throw popcorn in the face and then react like Leslie Nielsen in Police Squad when he gets a towel in the face. So I said, you know, okay, it's going to be heavily buttered, heavily salted right in the eyes. And some people got some really great photos of like every individual kernel in motion in his face as he's reacting to it. So I was a wrestling stooge. That's the title of my next book. I was a wrestling stooge.
And again, just a regular work night on a Saturday here at the Mahoning.
Yeah,
it's
How was your Saturday at work?
Memories forever that'll just be burned in our brain, and make this job, if you call it, so crazy.
So anybody next year when we start talking about Real Rumble and you roll your eyes and you say wrestling, yeah, it is incredibly sharp. It knows that it's funny. It's very funny. And it's about 2 hours of wrestling you get before the before the film even hits the screen. So I think people could come to that just for the wrestling and have a completely entertaining $10 worth of fun. And, the movies are almost gravy on top of that. So I highly encourage anybody who doesn't think they like wrestling to at least come out to one of those days next year, because you may be converted.
We will convert you 100%. And what do we have that Sunday?
That Sunday was a special tribute / fundraiser show recently passed Norm Macdonald and Bob Saget. This is a film that was directed by Bob Saget, starring Norm Macdonald, and that was Dirty Work on May 5th. Our friend Chuck Moran did a poster for that, and a portion of the proceeds from the poster sale and the tickets at the gate were going to go to the Scleroderma Foundation, which was a charity that Bob Saget was a big supporter of because his sister had passed away from that illness years earlier.
Yeah, and I'll tell you guys, I've had many a chuckle on the lot. I have not laughed that hard in a long time on the Mahoning lot. Maybe since when we did Monty Python. That was uproarious. But yeah, the laughter from the crowd, the connection with everybody who so loved the humor of both Bob and Norm. It was so much fun. It was one I'll never forget. And yes, Chuck knocked it out the park with the poster. Chuck has the biggest heart as well as the biggest talent. So really, really fun night. And one that I hope we can continue to do is bring some of the 90s comedy gems around. Just whenever we can do comedy, it's really great.
After that, speaking of comedy, we had Tunnel Vision Tuesday Exhumed presented pretty rare, I think, 35 millimeter screening on June 7th of Dolomite, starring Rudy Ray Moore, which is one of the most entertaining films for all the right and wrong reasons. This is 1975. Dolomite is a player, gets out of prison. Willie Green's moving in on his nightclub and he wants to take it back. And a lot of people probably know this at all because mainstream contemporary people, because Eddie Murphy did he did a biopic of Rudy Ray Moore and the making of Dolomite called Dolomite Is My Name that was on Netflix. That's really, really good. And we had Mark Jason Murray, who's the author of this excellent Rudy Ray Moore biography called Thank You for Letting Me Be Myself, did this really great 10-minute video introduction showing off the original clapperboard from Dolomite, all these Dolomite posters in the background that we ran on video before the film. But I really wish I could have made it out for this. I just could not. But Dolomite is a blast. If you've never seen it, go see it. That, Human Tornado, Disco Godfather. I would love for us to be able to bring more of these to the Mahoning screen. I just don't know how readily available they are on 35.
Yeah, it was a treat, and one that Harry bent over backwards to make happen as far as getting the print. It's an essential one. It really is. When you talk about blaxploitation and the wave there, we could easily fill a weekend with Rudy Ray Moore. And yeah, it was a great night. We did get weather. It was our worst Tuesday as far as weather goes, but it still had a really positive experience with the screening, a really great crowd. People were all into it and traveled great distances to see Dolomite up on the big screen. But a great opportunity to shine a light again on a genre that we don't get to hit too much at the Mahoning. And it led right into a great genre weekend.
So this is, I wasn't there, but you shouldn't have a hard time remembering this weekend. This was, as we record this last weekend, the 10th and 11th of June, it was Catherine and Kelly Save the World. This was 4 films featuring the stars Catherine Mary Stewart and Kelly Maroney, who joined us in person both nights to, kiss hands and shake babies and sign autographs and pose for photos. And it looked like they were having the time of their lives and were super sweet. We ran Chopping Mall, Jim Wynorski's Chopping Mall, on Friday with The Last Starfighter. And then on Saturday, it was Night of the Comet and The Apple, which I still need to see. How was that?
Holy crap. Well, the films were amazing, obviously. The fandom was off the charts. And talk about dream guests. The ladies literally posed at the marquee. They posed in front of the screen. They were having the time of their lives. And that's what we see a lot here at the Mahoning is we have guests who are used to being kind of a name in a row. You know, when you go to these big conventions, it's, hey, 40 guests, opportunity to meet them all. Here, it's hyper focused. We had people who were fans of Catherine Mary Stewart's Hallmark work, who were fans of Kelly Maroney's work beyond acting. So it's like we had people from all walks coming to love on Kathy and Kelly, and they're friends in real life. And in a great kind of back behind the scenes story, it was originally just Kathy who was booked, and we had a connection because she appeared at the Pocono Cinema, which isn't far from us, that Sandy at the time was helping out. And we had her booked for like 2 years, and then COVID swept in, and it was like, all right, we can't find the right time to do it. And this was the year, and she pitched bringing Kelly with her. That doesn't happen too often where somebody's like, hey, I could either be all the heat or bring somebody as well. And yeah, the fact that they got along so well, the group photos, so many combo photos of the ladies. Talk about a dream come true, getting a photo with both the girls, the sisters from Night of the Comet. It was fantastic. And got to mention James, got to shout out James and his production value for Night of the Comet. He did the disintegrated people. So it was a bunch of clothes on the ground with dust, and which we've done in the past when we screened Night of the Comet. And the cosplayers. People came out in costume. People came out to wow and impress Kathy and Kelly. They brought gifts. It was just what the Mahoning does right, firing on all cylinders.
Yeah, the photos were just, it was one of those weekends where, again, I've been sick the last week. So it really missed being there and missed being able to see that in person. And then they did intros for all the movies, which we often will have our actors or directors do. We have them come into the projection booth and get on the mic that, you know, the projectionist usually uses and just say a few words about the movie before it starts. And again, not to flog the Patreon too much, but if you're a Patreon member, we film all of those and put them all on Patreon so you can see them. And that's how I was able to experience the weekend vicariously, was through all these really like amazing photos and videos everybody had posted all over the internet.
And that's kind of the beauty of the Mahoning in a weird way. I used to have to do that when I was running the vineyard. I'd miss Camp Blood every year or whatever it is, because I had a weekend plans or weekend festival to work. Social media does the job for you to relay as much as you want to see of the event. It's really fantastic. And we've been trying to do our best with making sure that we shine a light on all the different departments and all the hard work that they do each week.
The day after that was a day that especially was a bummer for me to miss. And we had been working on this for a while. And initially, I think we were just going to show this movie. And then it was, maybe we can get a vehicle from this movie. And in fact, there's a previous podcast, I think the June preview podcast, where we kind of talk around maybe we can get the Batmobile. And we did. And why would we get the Batmobile from 66? It was because we were showing Batman, the movie from 1966. And so it's this group TV show cars, is it called?
TV show cars, yes.
And they have a 66 Batmobile, a Bat Cycle, a Bat Signal, and cosplayers that I gotta say, from the photos I saw, it looked like Adam West was standing there. And it looked like Yvonne Craig was standing there in that like sparkly purple Batgirl outfit. And they were taking photos with people, and they had a setup where you could pay for a photo and they would print it out as an 8x10 glossy, like on the spot. And they had that set up right next to, we weren't sure what the weather was going to be. So they had it under the tents that run along, the carport tent that runs along the side of our building, and had that as soon as it was dark enough, the bat signal was hitting the screen, and the print of the film apparently looked perfect. That was a little bit of a concern too, is this an old print from the 60s and is it going to be beat up? And apparently Rob and Mike said it was a restruck print from 1989. And we know why they made that in 1989. And it looks like it was just an amazing event. And I saw pictures of you and Virgie there and Rob dressed as Batman. I mean,
talk about, yeah, it was probably our best night of the year. And just as far as the atmosphere, because you had endless families. You had young and old. I'm talking infants dressed up as Batman, and elderly people coming in, you know, rocking their Batman shirts. It was fandom on display for everybody to see. The fact that we got to offer a pro photo op, which is normally we deliver that on a production value level, but the fact that you got to walk away with a glossy 8x10 and he really took his time to get a great photo and include everybody in the family. And it was just something else, especially for a night that we were looking at it all week like, oh, we are going to get nailed with rain. And sure enough, gates opened. It was beautiful. We got a good hour and a half, maybe 2 hours until the rain came down, and then it stopped right before the movie started. So everybody got what they wanted. Virgie, come here, buddy. What do you think about the Batman event that we did? Did you have so much fun?
Yeah.
Who did you get to meet?
Batman, Batgirl.
And Batgirl. Yeah, we got a little crew photo op right before gates opened, and Batgirl comes over and says, Can I be next to this handsome gentleman? I was just like, oh boy. Years from now, he'll be looking back and being like, I was so blessed.
And you're like, you're talking about me, right? Me, Virgil.
I'm over here.
Virgil Carmine. It's me. Get this kid out of here.
But yeah, it was that across the board, making memories to last a lifetime. And again, the print was stupefying. Print notes are weird. They literally go through and inspect and will mark down every nick, cut, fringe that there is on a print. And when we got those notes back, I was just like, I don't care. What does this color look like? And we were so pleased with it being an 89 restrike and looking so beautiful. It was, yeah, again, one of my favorite events we've ever done here at the Mahoning for the family appeal of it all.
And now that brings us up to, we talked about a little at the beginning. It's a little bookend. Aliens. Tuesday night, which was last night as we record this, that was June 14th, James Cameron's Aliens on the big screen. We knew this was going to be a big one because Aliens did so well, and the drive up, the pre-sales for Alien were really strong, and then the drive up was like almost like 100 people just showed up at the gate. And usually, still now, our business tends to be, the majority tends to be pre-sales. That when you split the numbers of who buys tickets in advance and who buys at the gate, it's usually a lot more in advance. But last night, I think we had 130 or so pre-sales right before we opened the gate. And I think we had almost another 100 at the gate, if I'm not wrong.
Oh, it was a great turnout. And yeah, the numbers were staggering. And the crowd was electric. Of course, John Demmer was in the house, John and Cindy. And they had a motorized face hugger going around the lot, which was a huge hit. Of course, he dressed up his car. And Zeneca and Jason, again, like knocking it out the park. They put together this lifelike xenomorph out of like paper mache and cardboard. And it was nuts. To the point where we had fans reaching out saying, I can't make it. Can you take pictures of it for my kid? We're so upset. And it's just so cool, the heat that each department brings to the show each night, even on Tuesdays.
And that's up to date with what we've done so far.
And that's crazy. It's been a month, bro. It's literally been like
when you said the last month, in my head, I was like, his math is a little off. But then I looked, I'm like, no, it's been a month. Like we've done that much stuff in a month. It does feel like a year. And
when we go through and pitch the calendar, I'm just like, God, this is like a spoil of riches where literally any night that the Mahoning is open, there is something just incredible going on. So, for you guys that are listening, that are planning your summer journeys, check out the calendar, mahoningdit.com. We got a ton of amazing events coming up, including some of our biggest with VHS Fest and Camp Blood and Freddy Fest and all that fun stuff. So stay tuned. It's only just begun.
And it's still, plans are still being solidified for various shows. Things do change up to the last minute on some things. So if you're wondering why a show hasn't been announced quite yet, it's because we're still working on it. But shows are going to get announced at least one a week until, I think you had initially said you thought maybe by August we would have announced everything.
That was our hopes, and I'm really still trying to push for it. We got a nice head start and a nice addition to this season as we started putting together calendars, thanks to Chris at Spiral Rewind, that we can hand out at the gate and also give people a visual online to see. Because, if you're a follower and a fan of the Mahoning, sometimes it's bombardment of cool and it's hard to prioritize and figure out where things fall. So the calendar is a great visual to say, all right, can't miss this one, can't miss this one, can't miss this one, So check it out. You can get that at either the Patreon or online at mahoningdit.com.
As you leave the theater, folks, please be careful. Don't let this
happen to your car, be sure to remove the speaker before you leave. If you should accidentally pull a speaker loose, please turn it in at our snack bar or box office. Thank you.
Well, it has been a blast. I apologize if any of the noise going on in the trailer was distracting to anybody. Mark, I think you sounded great with the sick voice. I think it really works for you.
It's my personality voice.
Well, we love you guys truly. Again, we can't encourage you enough to check us out on Patreon, follow us and like us and give us some love on the podcast. And of course, come out to the lot. It's not an experience over the summer unless the Mahoning is part of it. So on that note, Jeff, take it away, my friend.
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks again for coming out tonight to the Mahoning Drive-In Theater. We hope you'll come back and see us again real soon. The exit is on the right-hand side of the screen at the front of the field. And most importantly, have a very safe trip home. Good night and God bless you.